Fujifilm is bringing out a new kit lens in 2024, likely together with the new X-T50. This lens is set to replace Fujifilm's 18-55mm kit lens that has long been on the spot for the best kit lens that has ever been. It came out back in 2012, has no weather resistance, but does have optical image stabilization. So after around 12 years, this renewed kit lens wants to shake up the camera manufacturer's kit lens landscape. Let's see how that works out for them. Firstly, and this is probably the most significant change with this entire lens, it has an internal zoom, meaning if you zoom in or out, the size of the lens does not change. And this brings plenty of benefits other than the obvious. For one, there is virtually no or minimal weight shift within the lens through the internal zoom, and therefore it is way better to work on a gimbal with. There is also the potential for really good weather sealing because of this internal zoom, maybe even to the level of Fujifilm's prime lenses. On Fujifilm's other zoom lenses like the 18-55 or the 16-80mm lens, you always have to dry the lens tube after using it in the rain, because otherwise fluids could get into the internal optics of the lens. In addition to that, this lens will have a similar size to the 18-55mm lens and therefore be very inconspicuous on your camera, similar to Fujifilm's newer prime lenses. Now, there is also a downside, and that is that this lens is missing optical image stabilization, but it really isn't that big a deal because there seems to be a shift within Fujifilm to get all the cameras to have in-body image stabilization. When traveling, you really don't want a big lens, especially if you have the camera on a strap around your neck. The problem isn't even the weight, but that it's just unhandy to have such a big lens on a camera when you're out. This makes you a potential target for pickpocketing or honestly just clumsy moves where you move around and smash your camera with your lens against a door or something like that. And this lens seems to be perfect for traveling because it's small enough on your camera that it's very inconspicuous, but still versatile enough. So you can still use all the standard focal lengths you need for an unknown area. When traveling to new cities or rural areas, I usually take my 23mm f2 prime lens because the zoom lens is just too much. But most of the time I long for a bit more focal length on the telephoto side of things. This is where this new lens will come in clutch with a very compact footprint but still a versatile focal length range. Especially in areas you don't know yet, I think the sweet spot always lies in between the 24-70mm full frame focal length, which is exactly what this new kit lens will have. And even though I usually bring my 23mm f2 lens, I rarely use this lens wide open. Most of the time I shoot in between f5.6 and f11. So specifically for traveling, I don't think the high aperture on this lens is a big deal. Apart from this lens seemingly being perfect for traveling, it also has other benefits. The previously mentioned internal zoom really helps when you're shooting with a gimbal because there is no weight shifting around, and if so, only minimal within the lens, which oftentimes is a problem with lenses that don't have an internal zoom, that when you zoom in, the lens will tilt downwards because of the weight shifting around. Unfortunately, this lens also has downsides, but they do seem like compromises that are, at least in my opinion, kind of understandable. Firstly, this lens is not a portrait lens, but honestly, usually when people want to shoot portraits, they will get a prime lens anyway because they want that creamy, blurry background that you can only achieve with f1.2 or f1.4. So it doesn't seem like such a big deal that this lens will have an aperture of f2.8 to f4.8. And even though that is a downgrade from the previous version, the 18-55mm version had f2.8 to f4, that's also not as big a deal as people might think. Because the difference on the telephoto side from f4 to f4.8 sounds like a big deal, but it's honestly less than half a stop of light. And then this lens loses 5mm on the telephoto side, but honestly you can easily crop this in post. So again, it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. And the gain of 2mm on the wide angle side definitely makes up for that. And then we come to the topic of image quality with this lens. Just like all of the previous prime lenses that came out from Fujifilm in the last couple of years, I expect this lens to also have impeccable image quality. I wouldn't go so far as to say that this lens will compete with Fujifilm's current prime lenses, not even that it will be similar or closely similar to the 16-55mm red badge lens, but probably much better than the 18-55mm lens, which was already awesome, especially for a kit lens. Either way, I think this lens definitely splits opinions on people hating the fact that it loses the optical image stabilization, that on 50mm it will have an aperture of f4.8, and on the other side people that will potentially love this lens for the fact that it's a compact travel lens that may be even able to compete with Fujifilm's prime lenses. Now, in my personal opinion, this lens is definitely something that piques my own interest because I always look for lenses and cameras that are very compact and therefore very handy to carry around, demand, and this is also a big reason why I joined the Fujifilm X system in the first place. If you want to find out more about the X-T50 that this lens is set to be released with in 2024, check out this video right here.